Hey. What's up, horror fans? Boy, am I excited today. Pete here, and we have our very first returning writer guest to the show today. We've had, what's his face? David Weiner from In Search of Darkness come back a couple of times, our favorite filmmaker. But today we have Mr. Keith Lansdale back on the show. Keith, welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. Last time Keith was on, we talked about a whole bunch of things. We talked about Big Lizard. We talked about Christmas with the Dead. We talked about The Pale Door, all different projects that Keith has been involved in. We've talked about his super famous dad, Joe Lansdale, and his sister as well, Casey Lansdale. And today we're going to be focusing on a graphic novel that he has coming out called Prisoner of Violence. And so I was going to ask you just right off the bat, you just were at Armadillo Con in Austin, right?
Almost.
Oh,
So yeah, we had plans to go. We were getting all ready to go, and then we had one of our party had a positive for COVID. So we were like, oh no, we need to all get tested and see where we're going. But it was kind of by the time we could all get tested, we would have already missed the opportunity to cancel if it seemed appropriate. So we ended up just canceling it. Luckily, nobody else in our group had COVID, but it was just kind of we couldn't risk it. We couldn't risk infecting anybody else that we might run into. So it's a shame because we would have loved to have been there, but we did have to miss it for just
yeah.
precautionary.
Okay, well that's good to know because actually when I heard that you were going to be there and your dad was going to be there, I was like, oh man, I should go buy tickets and like meet them in person because I live near Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And then so then maybe next time. But like Armadillo Con is like for sci-fi, right?
Armadillo Con, yeah. I mean, there's it's kind of a more branching. It's really more kind of a Texas thing at this point. I mean, it's that armadillo is there for a reason.
Right, right.
But yeah, I mean, they do a bunch of different things and we were lined up for panels for just kind of people want to talk about screenplay writing in general and that sort of stuff. So it's got kind of a pretty large umbrella. If there's a focus, I'm not even sure what it is because they never pigeonhole either side of it. So
Yeah. Well, now you can add because you have screenwriter on your resume. You've written short stories and you've written co-written Big Lizard, and then you also have comics. I know you wrote that X-Files comic with your dad. I really love that the a couple of issues of the X-Files that you wrote.
yeah,
But now for today, you have Prisoner of Violence, and that is sort of like a spin-off of Prisoner 489, right?
that's correct. Yeah, it's something that's in Dad's universe of Prisoner 489, which I'm actually also knocking out a script for. So there's a chance that we may see that get made if I get lucky. We've also got another script that we're shopping around for something else called a projectionist. So who knows? Maybe we'll get something made there. But I'm excited. I like playing in this universe, the 489 universe. It's simple, but it has a lot of like ability to be whatever we need it to be, while it's also got kind of its own little focus as well, being this, which I don't know if I should say spoilers or not, but I guess this is kind of a main thing. But the whole idea is that these islands out there in the who knows where, they are kind of the worst of the worst when it comes to a prison, and so the activities that happen in both Prisoner of Violence and Prisoner 489 are both on these very secluded, not good people islands.
Yeah, I've read a handful of your dad's books so far. Like I just got into him during the pandemic, and I just absolutely love his stuff so much. I read a lot of the Hap and Leonard stuff, and then of course I also saw like the adaptation of On and Off of Mountain Road, Bubba Hotep. I read a Conan comic he did. I read Cold in July, which is like one of my favorites.
There's an adaptation of Cold in July too. If you haven't seen that, there's a movie version. It's very worth it. So.
Yeah, with Don Johnson and the guy who plays Dexter. Yeah.
Dexter, exactly.
Yeah. So I saw that too, actually, as well. And the thing is, like, when I started reading Prisoner 49, I was like, oh man, this is not like this other stuff at all. And I was trying to kind of place it. I know that your dad kind of says that he doesn't write in a specific genre. He just kind of writes what he wants to write.
That's
like,
very true, yeah.
Is there anything else like Prisoner 489 in his mythos?
His repertoire. I mean, I will say right now, I have not read everything of my dad's, but that's because he writes faster than anybody could read. I have read a large chunk of what he has written, and there are definitely elements of other like supernatural oddities, sort of things that you could say fit under that umbrella, but something that is kind of the well, I mean, there's tropes out there, so we'll just say the unstoppable force,
Yeah.
which is what this falls under. His, not mine. Mine is something a little different. But it's. I'm not saying there's not another one like it, but I only say that because I haven't read everything. But it's
Yeah.
the only one, at least, that comes to mind. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything that's specifically like this else.
Okay.
Otherwise.
Yeah. If it's okay with you, I was wondering if we could spoil the Prisoner 49 story just so we could kind of.
Yeah, it's been out for a while, and to hell with him. He's not here to say we can't. So
There you go.
no, Prisoner 49. Do you want to give what? I mean, did you read it? Is that where or okay?
Yeah, I read it, and like for me, it's like you establish the islands at the very beginning,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
you know that there's these horrible prisoners that are essentially going there, they're getting
Yeah.
executed, and then they're being disposed of.
Right.
And what intrigued me so much is there's not a lot of detail at the very beginning. Like you don't know when the story really takes place. You don't know where these islands are.
Right.
It's very vague.
I like the ambiguous side of that too, and that's something I was referring to earlier. It's kind of there's no real rules, but it also has a lot of this is kind of what to expect from the universe. But the reason why I was asking is because I don't want to give all beginnings, middle, and end of the story unless you need that for what we're talking about. So, how much of it do you need spoiled? I guess is where I was trying to get with that.
Well, if we talk about like the creature, or like
Okay.
we don't have to say what the creature is in the first
Okay.
story, but I thought that was a very inspired choice. Like,
Yeah, I think we should talk about the creature, and
okay,
I think that's okay to spoil.
okay,
I want to skip giving away the ending if we can avoid it because
sure,
somebody hasn't read it. I want them to still enjoy the ending. But yeah, the setup there is that there's two islands essentially. There's the island where people are kept, and the island where people are buried. And our hero, in this case, our protagonist, he is one of the people that's on graveyard duty. He digs the holes and he makes sure that the people go in them. The problem is that the person that is up for execution isn't a person. It is an old mythological golem that has come back to life, and so it is this unkillable force that has showed up on these islands. So of course, our poor people have nowhere to go with an unstoppable force that is very very angry for what has happened to it, and that's essentially the arc without getting into the ending. So,
yes. And see, like the fact that it's a golem, like once we got to that point in the story, that's where I was like, what? I was like really thrown off by that. But it kind of reminds me of Bubba Hotep, for example, because like when you think of the setting and the way that the characters interact with each other, I know it's very like ambiguous, but you always kind of get that kind of feeling of like it's like an American thing, and they're talking kind of like they're from like Texas, like we are, right?
mhm.
And but then you throw in this sort of mythological creature from like a different part of the world, and it reminded me of Bubba Hotep like that,
Right. And you were asking for things similar, and I would definitely say Baba Hotep is not too far removed. Now, of course, those stories are nowhere close to each other because there's so many other elements going on in Bubba.
Right?
But and honestly, I think that there's way more going on in Bubba. But at the same time, it is essentially that same thing, an unstoppable force from an out of place area, and our poor heroes have no idea what to do. So
Yeah, yeah. So I think that you're implying that in your Prisoner of Violence comic that it's going to be a different force altogether.
It is, and I definitely want to stay away from too many spoilers on that one because it hasn't even come out yet. But essentially, it is in the same universe, and there is still an unstoppable force, but it's a different. Um, it's got a different angle than what we're working with here.
Yeah.
There's something else to it that's going on that, of course, I mean, can't use the same world and do the same thing. So I definitely took the same idea, took the same island, and then twisted it on its head a little bit and did something different. So I'm really excited about what it became. I'll tell you something that you may not be aware of that's actually really amusing, but I wrote this in 2017, and it's just now getting to a point where it's being able to be printed because there were the people that were doing it. They had some other projects they were lining up, and right about the time that it came time for mine to kind of fall in, that was when COVID took over everything, and of course it was real hard to get anything made.
Right.
So it sat dormant like our golem for a very long time.
Right.
Essentially came to life this year because I started to reach out and I was like, hey, we've got this story made. What do we need to do to get it done? And he was like, well, the only thing I'm looking for was some specific art that we couldn't find anybody that was doing. I luckily had done enough comics that I had a connection that I was like, I know somebody that knows a guy. So we were able to find what he needed at the price range he was willing to do it for, and it put some life back into it again. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because like the publisher is I wrote it down here. It's dang, where did I write it? Oh, hold on. They're no, not that one. I'm sorry. Well, the publisher that put it out, right? They also they did the short story or the novella, and then they're doing your comic too, right? And like this is the first comic they're doing, the first graphic novel, right?
Yeah, we've done. I mean, I don't know if it's there. I don't keep up with what they have done beforehand, but yeah, it's one of those things that they haven't. Where was I going? I thought Dark Regions is what the name you were looking for.
Right.
And so, yeah, he's done some other projects and stuff with me, and that was essentially. What's funny is that I'll get emails from him, and I can tell that he's got like a to-do list because I'll get an email from him for the comic, and then like later that day I'll get a completely different email about a different project we're working on, and I'm like, I can tell that he is just like going down his checklist today.
Right.
Yeah, so we worked together on a few things, and I know that Dad's worked with him, of course, which is how I ended up with him in the first place. And yeah, he's it's just one of those things that he's got 1,000 things going, so I know that's essentially part of what the holdup was. But yeah, COVID hitting was just like it put a slow on a lot of different things we were working on. I had my script that I mentioned a little bit beforehand, The Projectionist, and it was pretty much ready to roll out of the gate, and then COVID set that one aside as well, and some other things that I was doing. So, I mean, luckily I was able to still continue to put things down on paper during all that going on, but it was hard to kind of get it over the finish line. So I've got a lot of projects that are, done, but still waiting in the wings sort of thing. So
yeah,
we'll kind of see what comes of that. But yeah, I'm happy to see this one's finally got off the bench because it's one of the real neat things that I rarely get to do in this sort of thing is because I wrote it so long ago and my memory is awful. Whenever he was finally getting to the point where he had a finished product and he was like, hey, I need to make sure this looks good. I'm reading it and I've forgotten everything I've written. So I'm laughing out loud going, I am hilarious. So that's the thing is that there's rarely an opportunity where you're so removed from something that you did that you get to kind of almost read it fresh from because when you write stuff you tend to all the jumps and everything like that, so but it'd been a minute and I was like, I don't even remember what I was doing here. So, I was going through and I was like, oh man, this is funny, I am loving this. And I was like, I know you're not supposed to laugh at your own stuff, but I don't care. This is great, I'm enjoying it. So rarely is there an opportunity to really do that.
Yeah. Well, the story Prisoner 489, I think there's some funny moments in that. I mean, it starts out real bleak, and then it's like scary, like a thriller. But there's funny moments interspersed in there. Yeah. And like I was wondering because like you were talking about kind of knowing somebody, and that's how the project got rolling. I know the artist is Danielle Serra, right?
He did the cover. and I don't actually, and like I said, part of it is this 5 year window. I've kind of forgotten a lot of the who did the original art, so I apologize, but I actually don't know that name. But what we needed here at the very end was something that had some lettering and things like that. A lot of the art got done back in 2017, but it
Oh,
didn't have any dialogue. It didn't have any of the final touches. You know what I mean? All the
sure.
things there at the end. And if you're familiar with my comic work at all, you'll probably know that I've worked with Jacques a few times.
Yeah.
Jacques is actually, a collective of a few different people who do art, and so that's something that the main guy I talk to, I call him Jacques, but he's actually just kind of their spokesman, and so he's got an army of other people that all do, and one of them was willing to do it at the price we wanted, so that was kind of how that worked.
I mean, you just like blew my mind. Like I'm like a huge comic book fan. That's like my main thing is comics, and like I thought Jock was just a freak one person.
As did I for a very long time, because that was kind of how I had taken the. I talked to a guy and I referred to him as Jacques, and he was always there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's actually got a few people that work with him, and so they're kind of a collective house, and they all just go under the name Jacques. But I don't. I think that may be his real name too. I don't
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah. I
uh,
always thought of Jacques as like the guy that did that comic, The Losers, and then he also did that crazy picture of the Joker for like Scott Snyder's run, where it was like the
he
Joker made
may,
out of
he may
bats.
have, and like I said, I don't want to. I don't know enough about how their operations work to say that he didn't, and these aren't just people he has recently brought in. But I just
Yeah.
know that they've kind of used the the big umbrella of Jacques to do a lot of things, and I'm learning that here recently. I was. Because whenever he was telling me, because this was kind of how I found out, is because I reached out and was like, "Hey, we're trying to find somebody for this," and he was telling me, "Yeah, I think I've got somebody here in my group that can do that." And I was like, "I didn't know you had a group." And then we kind of went back and forth a little bit, and I started to realize, oh, there's something else. There's another element here that I have completely just missed up until now. So I don't
Yeah.
know if it's recent or not, but the guy I've kept touch with all these years. As far as I'm concerned, he will always be Jacques, but he may be Jacques. I don't know. He lives in another country, so there's also a language barrier occasionally, and but he's very nice, and he and I continue to put things together. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I read the Kindle version of
mhm.
Prisoner 489, right?
Okay.
And when I was doing some research, it said that the novella was illustrated by Santiago Caruso.
Mhm.
Like in the printed version of it, is there artwork in the
There
printed
is
version?
full page art. It's really kind of interesting, darkish, gothic looking
Yeah.
art. It's very unique. It's it seems almost like it shouldn't belong there, but at the same time that when you see it, you're like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Because you rarely see a novel that's got full page art, scattered within the pages. And I guess it's more a novella. It's less than 100 pages, but it was such a unique kind of thing to see, and yeah, it stands alone, and I guess that's kind of one of the intrigues of doing it is because, like I said, there's a lot of room to do a lot of fun things within it. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think that it's really intriguing because it's so vague.
mm,
Your imagination kind of fills in the gaps, like what's going on there. And I really do encourage people to go check out the book, at least the Kindle. If I could get my hands on the artwork, I'd love to see that too. But like, go
yeah,
check out the.
let's see if I can find. I might
Oh,
have nearby. Let me see, just so I can kind of show you
yeah,
if
perfect.
I have any of it.
No problem. Yeah.
I say that and I don't know where it is and I don't want to spend too much time looking, but I just finished rereading it because, as I was saying, I'm about to do the script for it. So I don't know where I put my book, but I may have.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Hey, ha.
Perfect. Perfect.
So yeah, this is kind of. I'll just show this one. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is
Yeah,
kind of so
that
very
is awesome.
cool, art within the pages there. So.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, like you were talking about making the script for it. I'm actually super intrigued by that because you're a guy that has written film scripts, you've written, prose, and you've written comic book scripts. And I know that they're all very, very different.
they are.
And I think last time we interviewed you, you even kind of said that writing a script for a movie is not as challenging as writing prose because there's so much description that has to go into prose, right? Absolutely. But I was wondering, when you're adapting something that's as vague as this story, because obviously the story has like atmosphere and it has a feeling to it, right? Like, how the hell do you translate that into a movie?
Well, there's sometimes, this is kind of, let's see, I don't want to miss any element of this, but one of the things that whenever you're adapting somebody's story is that you are trying to be as, what do you call it, true to the original story as possible. And there's always going to be, anytime something gets adapted, where you're going to have those people that's like, oh, well, I liked this and this had to change, and this, that, and the other. And there's some things that don't translate as well on film as it does in the story. And a prime example is it's raining through most of the story. And so I was actually talking to Dad, when I was talking about doing the script stuff, and I said, there's certainly a part of this that the rain is like a big deal of this, but at the same time, it might be exhausting to watch a movie where every scene it's raining. Right. And we talked about it, and he was like, no, I don't think that would. And so I still have it. But the thing is that there are certain elements that you want to stay kind of like true to the story in a lot of different ways, because you don't want to do a disservice to the original story, as well as the fans that read that story. And when they come in, they obviously want to be entertained, but they also they're expecting a certain, story to be told. There are times like when I adapted Christmas with the Dead. If you've ever read Dad's original Christmas with the Dead story, it is, if you filmed it line for line, just as it is, you probably have about 15 minutes of actual screen time. It's a short story. It's a very simple kind of concept. Hero overcomes, hero deals, hero moves on sort of story. And even half of that includes a dog. So whenever I was writing the story, Dad was like, well, I just want to let you know, we are not going to be able to afford a dog, so cut that out. So I was given essentially about 8 minutes worth of actual story and responsible for 90 minutes of film. So wow. No matter what, you're going to end up having to do more in situations like that. This is a prime example where because the story is kind of hinted at on backgrounds of the characters, things like that. It's not a lot of, this is Larry and Larry did this. And you know what I mean? Like, we just kind of like get a few glimpses into who this character is. His name is actually Bernard. But right. Either way, I just pulled a name out. But I don't want people to be like, where the hell is this Larry? Sorry, I should have used the example right from the beginning. Right. But my point is that the character is somebody that has, his background hinted at, but there's more room to explore ideas like that in a film because you definitely have to, one, fill enough time, but also just because something vaguely mentioned as a memory works a little better when you're writing prose because you can hint at things a little more, whereas a screen, you are shown what you are shown. And of course, dialogue can still hint at things, but even that can be limited. Characters, either you have to be very careful not to just jump in with the exposition drop, to have the character like, well, before I, it's like, oh God, nobody cares, man. We just get to the golem. Right. I'm rooting for the golem at this point. So, the thing is that you can do that, but you have to do it very differently. And because you're given a little more time, you can make that work, but you also, one of the other things that I'm working with as I'm working through the script is that it's very much a momentum piece, the original story. Yep. It's as you were saying, it starts very slow, it builds up until it gets to this crescendo, and then all of a sudden it's downhill tumble all the way to the end. That's right. And so it's something that I want to use those moments of building to set a lot of that so that when we get to that moment of this is where it starts to roll downhill, we're not pausing the action to be like, hey, here's a flashback. You know what I mean? Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that at all. Yeah. So I definitely am going to expand in places that expand, but I also don't want to lose the original heart of the story and the beats and the momentum that have been set there.
Yeah. Well, I truly hope that it can come out. I want to go see it in the theater. I want Danny to see it. I want to review it because, like, one thing that I've kind of learned from adaptations of your father's work is that it's so unique to begin with. And one thing I think that like is interesting about your father's work is he's not like just making stuff to be like weird and like let's be as weird and bizarre as possible, or contradict ideas as much as possible. He's just telling a good story. However, it goes in directions that you don't expect, and he does stuff that you don't normally see. And I think this story is a great example because, like, it is only like 71 pages, and I'm reading it, and I didn't really know what to anticipate. And I think that is lacking in movies. Maybe in prose more often you get thrown a curveball. In movies, though, you can almost like predict, okay, this is going to happen in the,
and something that's hard is because there's always got to be that, and it's not so much a Hollywood ending, but it has to arc in such a way that audiences are almost able to predict certain things. And when films can do something outside of that, or can take that format and do it so well, because I mean the actual storytelling kind of beats, they're there for a reason. They're tried and true for a reason. They make a lot of sense. I mean, you can almost take just about any story, and a large percentage of them will be meet the characters, build the universe. The curveball happens that changes that universe. The characters are forced to deal with these new changes and come up with an idea on how they will fix it. And then there's the moment at the end where they apply the new logic, and then it either goes sideways or it works out. And then if it doesn't work out, then we either have to solve the new problem, or we have to come to terms with the new reality. That is the broad strokes of just about every hero's journey type story. And so doing that is, it's tried and true for a reason, but at the same time, being able to have any opportunity where you can do something different is fantastic. But I mean, there's even Christmas of the Dead, which is obviously been around about for decades now, and so I don't mind spoiling that. But even our main character in that, he is for those who haven't seen it, I'll give you kind of the very broad strokes of that. But our guy is a slacker who he's put off Christmas decorations and doesn't really care and doesn't really spend time with his family. And then the apocalypse comes and goes, and he has now got his wife chained in the basement as a zombie because he cannot come to terms with letting her go. And also he's still determined to put up his Christmas lights because that was the last promise he made. But problem is he is still who he was, and so he always kind of finds an excuse not to do it. And the curveball that happens is that he meets another person who they are, kind of more of a, this makes sense to do this, let's just do it. Stop putting things off and come to terms with reality. And then it turns out that as he sees the wife, he realizes that our main character has a lot more issues. He's having trouble letting go. He's got a neighbor that he still talks to, even though he's a zombie. He's got, his wife chained in the basement, and he's just like, look, this is not healthy, and you're not grieving, you're not coming to terms, and you're still not putting up the Christmas lights, because the moment that you do that, you have to actually move on, and you are not able to move on in any aspect of your life. Now, I won't spoil any further, so if anybody wants to kind of see how things go, but the real truth is that format I was talking about is not too far removed. There's, changes, and then, of course, when they try to implement those changes, things get outside of what they want, and then there's, kind of the rush to the end where are these new changes going to actually be beneficial for our main character, or is he going to lean back into who he was, and so on and so forth. So I mean, even my stories, I can put my bullet points on that just the same. But at the same time, that idea is unique enough that you're there for it. You don't really care that what the broad beats are if the characters are interesting or the story is intriguing enough. You're not going to, like, if you take just about any movie that was, I mean, they're starting to get to a point now where they're breaking away from that. So you see that more and more where movies can surprise you. And there's a million great examples out there of that. I really liked Parasite not too long ago because
Oh
of
yeah.
I spent the whole movie going, I have no idea what is
Right.
happening. And there's a lot of movies that I can say that, and I actually have not seen that Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I hear that's very similar in like take as well. Uh,
Right.
so I know that there are movies out there that will get to where you're just like, I have no idea what the next beat is going to be. This is wild as can be. Go ahead.
No. I mean, that's the thing. You make two really great points there. First off, you're right. Christmas with the Dead does kind of follow those typical beats that you're talking about. Like narratively, it kind of goes along. There isn't like a curveball twist, and it's not like Parasite where it's like, what is going on?
Right, right,
However, it's the way that it's framed and the trappings that are unique and original, and also the characters. Like I always remember to this day, I always remember the GM who's in the original film version, and he's
right,
also in your newer version that you are working on too, right?
right.
And like that's such a standout character. And so whereas the narrative is not necessarily like super different or whatever, it's the way it's set up, the dressing of it, and the
Right,
characters.
right. And
Yeah,
that's really what it is because I mean, honestly, you can get very deep into this conversation, but essentially, there's and I don't remember how many the number is. I feel like it's eight, but I could be wrong. But it's like there's only so many stories that are actually out there,
right.
and they all are mutations of those original stories. And so I think it's like eight stories or something like that. I could be wrong. It probably boils down to less than that, but yeah, essentially that's what it is. And so the beats don't always have to be unique, but the characters and the situations, there's infinite amount of ways that you can tell those stories, and I don't just mean, and then at the end, it didn't work out for the hero. You know what I mean? And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
that was kind of the first like iteration of stepping away from that you started to see become popular, and people were just like, not sure what to do when the hero doesn't win at the end. I mean, so there are movies and stories out there where that starts to become and because essentially, if you look back at the old westerns, you always know that the good guy is going to win the gunfight at the end. You always know that no matter what, there's going to be an element of he's going to be okay. He's going to ride off into the sunset.
Right.
But as time goes on, there's kind of a uh, well, there was one of the people that I watched the remake of Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, the one where they're in the mall.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
all,
yeah.
all fantastic, but you watch that entire movie, and they finally get on the boat and they go somewhere else, and then during the credits, it turns out that they actually go to another island that
Yep.
Eve also got the same problem. So they no matter what they ran away, they did all that, and they still lost. And I remember seeing that with people that just could not wrap their minds around the fact that what do you mean they went through all that and still lost? Like
Yeah.
that was like a weird, unreasonable concept at that time. Um,
Yeah. Such a bleak ending, such a nihilistic ending. And the thing, it's funny because it's in the end credits too. It's not
yeah,
even like in the actual
I
movie.
know exactly, and I love that they did that because they were like, and everything works out, and then of course, then they're like, oh, by the way, it didn't, and I was like, that's a brave move because it was not as popular then to have an ending where things didn't all kind of come together at the end, and they because and that's the problem with zombie things anyways, as somebody who's written a zombie thing, is that there are only so many different possibilities at the end. It's either
Right.
they cure everybody, or they find the new society, or they die, and that's
Right. Right.
or live until they're going to essentially die.
Yeah.
They've come to terms with the fact they're going to be eating that can of beans every day for the rest of their life because that's all there is. There is nothing else,
Yeah.
and it's why um, you know there's still limitations on kind of what certain endings can have, which is why whenever you see them do something different, you're like, hey, that's new and imaginative. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'll take that over a happy ending any day, something I didn't see coming.
Oh
So,
yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, and like the thing is, Christmas with the Dead, it like we said, it does kind of follow that kind of formula. And I know you've been working on it for a while now too. And you just put out like a trailer in the last like
so
couple months, right?
That second trailer that came out, which we've called Christmas with the Damned, to kind of be able to take one step away from it. That was one of the other projects that we kind of got eaten by COVID. We had put our feelers out to try to make that, and we dropped that trailer, I think, February of 2020, which of course, as you know, like March or April was when the world started shutting down.
Right.
And so that one kind of went by the wayside. But even though I don't know if that one will ever happen or not, that it may not be live beyond that trailer, which the trailer's on YouTube for anybody listening who wants to see it. But there is a musical version of it that exists, like a stage musical.
Yeah.
And it is my absolute favorite version of it, and it's the only one I didn't write. And so I actually helped the same person put together a podcast, and we used a lot of the same kind of ideas so that we could do it just all through listening with the sound and stuff. So we were trying to do that as kind of a alteration with COVID happening, but we've weathered that storm enough now, I guess, that we are going to start looking towards the stage musical version again. And it's the best version because even the original movie was a little bit kind of meta in itself. And so this kind of makes fun of what it is while also telling the same story and while also having some brilliant musical numbers. I just think that if that one ever comes out, that one's going to be the winner. That's going to be the one that people will remember more than anything else because it deserves to. It tells the same story, but it does it just absolutely wonderfully. And so we're still trying to put everything together, but it's hard because even though the world seems to be returning, it's still hard to get everybody everywhere at the same time. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Well, with that being said, like you said that you have a lot of projects that are kind of went dormant because of COVID. Do you find yourself essentially like focusing more on the ones that don't need like live action and recording, like not movies, but essentially like comics like this or like prose? Like what do you have that's actually coming out soon?
So essentially, the comic is probably the most recent one. There's also, and a lot of these, to answer your first question first before we get into the second question, a lot of the way that I choose what to write is what people are asking me to, like, hey, we want this sort of thing. And so because they may be more influenced by the fact of they know kind of, hey, there's going to be more demand for this type of media, then that's typically what they reach out for. I never consciously said, oh, COVID's here, so let's do more prose. But I know for a fact there are people like my sister who, she was a musician for, most of her life. And then all of a sudden all her shows went down. So she started to lean more into the writing side of things. So there are certainly elements of even the Lansdale clan where that's been very prominent. But no, people come to me and they say, hey, we need a comic, this. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. But I never consciously decided, okay, well, I need to focus more on this. I've got two real lists when it comes to writing: what other people want me to write and what I want to write. And typically, what I want to write is more speculative. I can't promise I'm going to get paid for. So typically, what I do is I knock out my what's going to get me paid list, and then as that list gets empty, then I come back over to my list and work through it. And so, whether or not I don't know. I'm always working on the same sort of ideas until I finish them. And if the world is exploding outside, I'm probably going to still continue to keep writing what I want to write because that's the story I want to tell. And I mean, obviously, I hope that other people read it, but I write it because I want to write it, and then I hope somebody else wants to pay me for it.
Right. That's the best scenario, best case scenario. Yeah. You mentioned your sister. I know that you and your dad and your sister were on Dead Headspace recently, right?
Yeah, we all did a family kind of podcast. It was an interesting event.
Yeah. I follow Patrick McDonough on Twitter, and he was posting about that because I know he's a big fan of all y'all. Yeah. I know that he's got an anthology coming out soon. Are you involved with that at all?
I'm not. We actually did talk about it, and he did mention that he considered reaching out to me about it, but he had some other names, and he said, I know that they're taking submissions, and I said, nah, I mean, I'm definitely not the most well known, but I'm above the submission level of putting it in a stack and hoping.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not to say that I'm above it and anybody below. It's just there's my time is better used in certain other ways because I've beaten down the door enough that people at least know that I exist. And a lot of times that's really good for that is making sure you get in the door.
Yeah.
I don't think that. There's probably people that do those submissions that are better than me. It's not, not to say I am the best, and not that. It just my efforts are better elsewhere. But he did mention that if they do another project, that he'd love to kind of offer me something right up front. But when he got involved, they'd already kind of put their list together, sort of.
Oh, okay.
And so it was essentially him wanting to reach out because we are good buddies. I like him a lot, but at the same time, I didn't want to also like, well, you're a part of this, so get me in. You know, and like that doesn't seem like the right move either. So
Right.
but yeah. So he told me, he was like, well, we can. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But if you come back around and do something else, think of me. I'll be here. So
Yeah.
he is. I wish him the very best. It sounds like they've got a fun lineup. He's talked to me a little bit about it, and it sounds like they've got a fun project. So I wish nothing but the best for him.
Yeah, I want to eventually get Casey on the Laster Cast channel too, and just talk to her because I think that her and your dad have like a graphic novel project coming out soon too, right?
They do. I actually they told me a little bit about what they had going, but it was kind of sideways mentioned, and I didn't really follow up. But they've got something that they put together that's like a graphic novel thing, as well as they've got some other stories that they're like a collection of short stories that they've done over time, sort of thing. Which my companion that I wrote with both of them is in that as well. So it's kind of a my name slips in there, but only accidentally. It's not like I did anything new for it. But yeah, they're putting that together, and I don't know exactly what all that entails. They would be able to tell you better. I know they've mentioned it to me, but I mean, I don't want to. We got so much going on, I can't keep track. I mean, that's
Yeah. Well, that's ultimately the problem, right? Because like for me, like when I do these interviews and stuff, a lot of times it's connected to these two presses that I get like a lot of the books from because I essentially like reach out to the guys. I'm like, hey, I see you want reviews and stuff. I'm here, and so I get all these books and I'm putting them out every month. But I really want to get into that like Lansdale stuff. Your father, your sister, because I really, really dig how unique your stuff is. And like honestly, like the stuff that I've read by either you or your dad, it's just like that's the real treat for me is I want to get more of that. I mean, I like all the writing I read in general, but there's something about y'all stuff where I could easily just spend the rest of my days just reading y'all stuff, but there's so much of it.
Well,
I
mean, honestly, if I was to take a guess why it's unique, this is obviously something that's just my take, and I could be completely wrong, but
yeah,
essentially what I think of when I see a lot of that is because my dad has never been one to like really embrace a genre. You know what I mean? Like if you ask certain people that are fans of dad, he'll say he's a horror writer. If you ask other people, they'll say he's a crime writer. If you say something else, you'll say, oh, he writes weird westerns. You know what I mean? And so he wears a lot of hats when he comes to doing that. And so and part of that is because we have been influenced by so many different genres. I mean, we're Big Lizard is a prime example. I love all the superhero stuff, and of course that is a fun stab at all the superhero type ideas. And but then you turn right around and you do like this Prisoner. This is obviously more a gothic, almost noir, weird. It's not really crime. It's not really drama, but it's kind of a science fiction, but not really like we're not robots and lasers here. We're just something weird happened to some very normal people. Right. And I think that's part of it is because though we definitely have specific podcasts that they are focused on horror. For instance, we'll pick on Deadhead again here, but whenever we're looking at something like that, it is a part of who we are, not the whole of who we are. So you see a lot of uniqueness because prime example, westerns, as we talked about before, you kind of know what to expect from a western. It's got a certain set of rules. But if you go in and you just want to tell a story, then it doesn't really need to be, oh, this is a weird story. This is a weird Western. This is a sci-fi. It's just like, let's tell the story. And what is the best way to tell that story? And we don't really, subscribe to any specific genre when we do that.
Right.
We do what we want to do, and then people tell us after the fact what the genre is. I mean, the very first time I ever really experienced that, because you were talking about Dad's, Happy Leonard, Cold in July, blah blah blah. I've been on just about every movie set of Dad's stuff. I've been lucky enough to be there, and I remember the very first one I ever went to. Well, it's not the first one, but the first major one was that Bubba Hotep. And one of the things they asked on the forums for like film festivals and stuff is, what genre is it?
Right.
And Don said he looked at that question for a really long time and was kind of like, I have no idea.
Right.
Because it doesn't match anything, because you would not know from the cursory, for anybody who hasn't seen it, Bruce Campbell plays Elvis who never died.
Right.
Elvis changed places with an Elvis impersonator. So our real Elvis, he has ended up in an East Texas rest home.
Right.
His best friend is John F. Kennedy. Only problem is that he's a black man who swears that he was died for his protection.
Right.
And so you don't know, are these people crazy, or is this really Elvis and John F. Kennedy? And it's done, in such a way that you never really know. You feel like but
right.
Do you? Because people that are delusional, they never are going to break character. And the other side of things is the two of them are battling a mummy that has accidentally washed up next to this East Texas rest home. So when it comes to checking the boxes, it's like, well, it's got a mummy, so is it horror? Is it science fiction? It's got Elvis. It's definitely not a musical. It's got, it's kind of got some dramatic moments, but it's also a comedy. And then on top of that, it's like the biggest thing Bubba Hotep has going for it is how heartfelt it is.
Right.
There's actually a real undercurrent of a lot of different real things that are terrible, which is how, as people get older, they're less respected. They're just a commodity almost for these rest homes and things like that. There's essentially there's a kind of a big scene in there where about how he doesn't get taken serious anymore, and about how nobody cares who he is, who he was, and it starts to break your heart when you realize that the real scary things in there is the fact that they're getting older and forgotten, and even two big names like John F. Kennedy and Elvis could go and be withered away in a rest home somewhere and forgotten. And there's a lot of those elements that I think that are the strongest elements. The mummy is an afterthought. He's nowhere near as terrifying as what that sort of thing can be. And so what box does that check? I mean,
right.
So my very, very long-winded answer to come back around, though, is just that I think it's because we don't fit to any genre. We never have. And I think that's essentially why we get these weird stories.
Yeah, but you know what? Honestly, I'm super grateful for them, and if it gives me an excuse to bring you onto this horror podcast YouTube channel, bring it on. Because I am always going to advocate for Christmas with the Dead or Christmas with the Damned, wherever y'all want to call it, because I just love that movie.
Yeah, Christmas with the Dead is the only one that exists, so we can still call it Dead. So
okay, yeah. And I ended up buying Danny a copy and sending it to him in New York so he could watch it too. Yeah. But we just love having you on here, and just talking to you, and just we even had your dad on here too, and that was awesome too. But if you ever want to come back on again too, man, we'd love to talk, about your upcoming projects too. I can get that projectionist going.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we definitely want to try to get a couple more things in place. Well, we had some funding for it, but once again, COVID kind of made that a little tougher because we had the money, but no way to do anything with it. So it sat for long enough that eventually our funding kind of dried up with it, and that was the end of that. So we're looking for other funding now, which we've got some ideas that we're working on for that. And if it comes through, I think that we're in a good spot to get it made. We've got our theater and everything that we want to use for it, and we've kind of looked at a few actors that might be interested in some roles and things like that. So we're big fingers crossed on that. But yeah, and I know you asked way back what other things I had coming out, but of course I've also got and I might have mentioned this before. I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but it's a collection of Lovecraft-inspired pirate short stories. That's me and a collection of a couple other people. And so I'm an editor as well as one of the story writers on that. And so that's kind of a weird little short story that it's been another one that's been sitting dormant. And so we'll see if that gets finished. We're getting kind of near the end of that. And also there's another short story collection that I've actually been made an editor on as well now, that we are a bunch of stories that are inspired by older poetry or things like that, which I picked the story Ozymandias.
Oh, okay.
And then it was kind of after that it was kind of, this is your inspiration, and then after that whatever comes, don't feel tied to it. And so I wrote that originally for Ozymandias, and then as time goes on, as they're putting together the project, they actually reached out and was like, hey, do you think you'd also like to be an editor for this? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. So so that's coming out too. We're in the editing stages. We're reading the stories that are coming in and things like that. So
what are the names of those two collections?
let me make sure I've got the right name, because there has been some changes a couple times, and I don't want to give you the wrong one.
Sure.
And I actually don't know I literally became an editor on, because I wrote that story for my Ozymandias story a few months back, but I just became an editor like a week ago, so I don't know what the final story of that one is.
Sure.
But the Lovecraft one we have been waiting for a little bit here, so let me see if I can find. Pirates of the Old World. There we go. That was.
That's an awesome title.
So
okay.
That's the one that we're currently on. But yeah, I don't know what the other one's collection is named yet. I'm not sure if it has a name. I just know when they originally were like, "Hey, this is the sort of story we need," and I was like, "Ooh, I like this poem here. I will come up with something." So, put my story together, got it to them. They loved it, and then apparently they loved it enough that they were like, "Hey, can you also do some other stuff with us as editor?" And I was like, "Sure thing." So. It's fun, but yeah, we're still in the building stages of that one, and then that Pirates of the Old World, that's getting near completion. I mean, we've done all the edits on those. We're kind of putting together the connective tissue for that one, and then it should be going to print pretty soon. I would think by the end of this year, if not the beginning of next, somewhere in there. But the world has a sense of humor, so we'll see what actually happens.
Yeah. Well, the world has a sense of humor, and you definitely have a weird collection of stuff. You said you got a Lovecraft pirate story, something that's based on Ozymandias. You got, your Christmas with zombies, just all over the friggin' map, and I love every piece of it, man. So we love having you on the show. If you ever want to come back, me and Danny would love to talk to you again too.
I'm around anytime you want to hear from me.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, until then, you guys go check out Prisoner of Violence, and we will have Keith Lansdale back on here again. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah.